What is up guys, JayFerGaming here and welcome to a different type of video. This time I'm going to be going through who I think will be on the F1 2018 grid. Silly season is pretty much in full swing now and there's going to be rumours all over the place, and I'm just going to go through my opinion. I'm going to keep it quite realistic. A few are opinions over what I think will happen in my head, but I think it's going to be a decent prediction of what it's going to be like for next season. I'm also thinking of putting out like a review video, because I did a video a few years back on who would be on the 2014 grid, so reviewing that and see how everything panned out for them drivers. So do subscribe if you want to see that and all my other content involving the F1 2016 and 17 in the future. So might as well start off pretty easily, and we'll go in constructors orders from last season. So first of all, Mercedes, and I'm going to be honest, this is really easy. I think they'll stick with Hamilton and Bottas. Obviously Bottas was given a one-year contract after Nico Rosberg retired, and he's done a brilliant job so far this season. I think he's got 2 pole positions and he's won 2 races, and he's only 22 points behind Lewis Hamilton, so that's really good considering he only had a couple of months preparation with the team, and he's not far off at all. I think Rosberg, if he stayed there, Rosberg would probably be behind Hamilton, but he probably would have slightly more points than Bottas. But I think Bottas has done a brilliant job overall. I personally wouldn't have put him in at the start of the season, but he's proven me wrong there, and I reckon he's a I don't want to sound bad, but he's a good number 2 driver for Hamilton. He's not at the same level as Hamilton, but he's good enough for Mercedes to win the Constructors. And say if you compare him to Raikkonen, well, I'll get onto that in a bit when I'm talking about Ferrari. Hamilton, I think, is a shoo-in to stay next season. I know there's been talks about him retiring, but he seems as hungry as ever. He seems to be performing as well as ever. Unfortunately, as a Ferrari fan, that I have to say that. But I've got to admit it, he's on top of his game, and personally, I think he's got a great chance to win the championship. I've just got a feeling Vettel is going to pip him, and that's not me being biased. I just got a feeling Ferrari will improve in the next few probably over the summer break, and I think he'll just beat Hamilton, but it's going to be very close. So Mercedes, pretty obvious there. We move on to the second team, and I'm going to be honest, I think it's pretty obvious once again. Red Bull, Ricciardo and Verstappen will stay. There's been murmurs of Verstappen moving to Ferrari. I personally can't see that. Ferrari, I think, would have to pay a lot of money for that to happen. Red Bull definitely wouldn't want Verstappen to go, and I think their results are going to improve in the second half of the season. I think Max is very frustrated with all the retirements this season. It's been 5 from the past 8 races, I think it is, and it's not good enough for a team like Red Bull. Ricciardo's pulled it out the bag recently. As Verstappen's had his struggles, Ricciardo has stepped up. 5 podiums in 5 races, and he recovered from last to 5th place at Silverstone. So I think he's a shoo-in as well. I know Ferrari have been linked with him over the past few years, but I just can't see either of them going to Ferrari for next season. So I think them 2 will stick with Red Bull. Here is my first big change. I'm not sure how realistic this is, but we're moving on to Ferrari, my favourite team. And I think Vettel will stay. I think he'll sign a huge contract. That 3-year one, which has been in the press recently. I think he will sign that. He will stay for 3 seasons. He'll become champion this season, hopefully. But Raikkonen, I say it every season, I think Ferrari should replace Raikkonen. When he signed in, I think it was 2013, was it? I was kind of excited, but I wasn't hugely excited. I would have rather Ferrari signed Hülkenberg. I think that's the reason Hülkenberg is not on a big team, because of Raikkonen. And I think Hülkenberg would have done a better job. I think Ferrari have absolutely no chance of winning the Constructors with Raikkonen. They need an absolutely dominant car, which I don't think is going to happen over the next few seasons. And Raikkonen, I think Bottas is better than Raikkonen. I think Raikkonen's maybe Williams standard. He's just not good enough anymore, unfortunately. He was brilliant in the noughties, but I think it's over for Raikkonen. I would have replaced him 2 seasons ago and put Hülkenberg in there every day of the week, but I've got that Raikkonen is going to leave, and I'm going to go with Grosjean. I think it's between Perez and Grosjean, but I think Grosjean's it's so hard to explain. I think Grosjean's more in with Ferrari than Perez would be. Grosjean, I don't think he's as good as Perez. I think it's pretty close. Grosjean, I think if he was in a top team, he would have got a number of podiums. He'd be more consistent than Raikkonen. We saw what he was like at Renault. Like, I think, what was it, 2012, the second half of 2012, I think Grosjean was better than Raikkonen, and I think Grosjean would score heavily, and he'd be a decent number 2 driver for Vettel. I think he challenged sometimes, but not enough where Vettel would get concerned and start having a go about his teammate or anything. So I have got Grosjean to move from Haas to Ferrari. Is that realistic? Will Ferrari stick with Raikkonen? It wouldn't surprise me if Ferrari stuck with Kimi, but I think this is definitely the time to change and get someone new in there. Perez or Grosjean, but I'm going to go with Grosjean. Next up, 4th team, Force India, and I've got one change here, and I kind of messed it up because I had Wehrlein in 2 teams, but I'm going to go with Wehrlein at Force India. Basically, I had nowhere else to put Wehrlein. I don't think he's going to stay at Sauber. I'd say he's definitely not going to get the driver in Mercedes. And the only 2 options I had for him were Williams and Force India. And I might as well talk about Williams as well. I think Williams will keep the same lineup with Massa and Stroll. And for Force India, I think they'll go for Ocon and Wehrlein. So that means Perez to leave Force India. Hope you guys are sticking with this. But Ocon and Wehrlein. Wehrlein, I think, should be in a mid-team. I wouldn't put him in a big team yet. He's not good enough for Mercedes, doesn't have the experience. I think Force India would be a good stepping stone for him, just like Ocon, because second half of last season when they were together, both were very good. I think Wehrlein was better than Ocon, but obviously Ocon was a rookie, and Ocon's done a great job at Force India this season. How many points? He's finished in the points all but 1 race, which was Monaco, where neither Force India finished in the points. So that's absolutely incredible. 2 6th places, and he's got a 5th as well. They're his best results. He's had a great season, and in terms of the standings, he is not far behind Perez at all. Only 9 points, and if he didn't crash into Perez at Baku, that could have been a double podium. Ocon could have got 2nd or 3rd there, I reckon. So yeah, they missed out there, but I think he's going to be a great driver in the future, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's at a team like Mercedes or Red Bull in the next few seasons. He's a great talent. Wehrlein, I don't think he has the buzz at the moment because he is with Sauber, and he can't display all his skills at Sauber. He is dominating Ericsson, and he has all of Sauber's points this season, all 5 of them. I think he has 2 points finishes. Yes, he does. That amazing 8th place at Spain. Great strategy there. But I feel like he needs a promotion. And out of Williams and Force India, I think Force India is more likely. I suppose they both have Mercedes power units, but I think Force India is likely to change with Perez leaving. So on to Williams, as I said, Massa and Stroll to stay in there. I've got to say, after the first 6 or 7 races, I was slating Stroll all the time, saying he shouldn't be an F1. So I probably said that a bit too early. I know in Silverstone he wasn't great. His pace is gonna be off in quite a few races, I think, but his performance in Baku and Canada and probably Austria as well, he's changed my opinion slightly. I still don't think he's good enough at the moment, and I think a 2nd season's needed just to get a real taste of what he's like and if he's going to be good enough. I suppose with the money, it's likely he might be in for quite a few seasons. So yeah, a bit like Maldonado, maybe he'll up his performance. Hopefully he does. He did a great job in Azerbaijan. And I think Massa, I just think he wants to stay in F1 for quite a long time. He obviously didn't want to retire last season, but with Stroll coming in and it looked like Bottas was going to stay, he was practically forced out. But it's good to see Massa. In like the first few races of the season, he was performing well, but he has had quite a bit of bad luck in the last few races. He always seems to have really bad luck, I've got to say. But I do like Felipe. He's putting in a decent performance in. It's not a great Williams car, to be fair, but as long as he keeps scoring consistent points, I can see him staying for next season. On to McLaren now. And oh god, what a season they've had so far. Alonso and Van Dorn. I think this depends on the power unit for next season. McLaren, they're probably not going to stay with Honda. And say they did stay with Honda, I've got a feeling Alonso would just leave at the end of this season. But I've got a feeling McLaren are going to get Mercedes or Renault. I've been hearing that Mercedes don't want to supply McLaren, but I can see that being more likely than a Renault, because someone's going to have to power McLaren, and I think Renault would be the backup option. Ferrari definitely wouldn't do that, so I'm going to go for Alonso if McLaren go to Mercedes power units, and I think he'll stick with Van Dorn. Van Dorn will get a second season either way. He was brilliant in GP2 a couple of seasons ago where he dominated the championship. I think he's getting unfair stick this season from people saying he hasn't, to be fair, he hasn't performed that well, but he's in a very underpowered car, and he's against, in my opinion, still the best driver in the world. Devastated Alonso left Ferrari a couple of seasons ago, but still, Alonso, if he was in a Mercedes or Ferrari, I think he would win this title this season. Even against Vettel and Hamilton, I just think that would be the case. So, McLaren, Mercedes next season with Alonso and Van Dorn, and say McLaren did stay with Honda, I think they'd put in, what's the young driver, Matsushita, I think his name is, the Japanese driver in GP2, who he has vastly improved this season. I think he's in the top 5 in the standings. I don't have the GP2 standings in front of me, but yeah, I think he would be the one to be called up if Alonso did decide to walk away. But I've got a feeling Alonso will stay for next season. So, next up, Toro Rosso, and this was tough for me. Carlos Sainz, it sounds like he does want to leave, but I have no idea where he would go. Maybe Ferrari, but I've got Grosjean there. Maybe Renault, I've got someone else there. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with Sainz for Toro Rosso for next season. And then for say we talk about 2019, I've got a feeling Verstappen might leave for Ferrari. I don't know why. I just have that feeling. I think he's going to get sick of Red Bull if they don't challenge for the championship next year. So, I think Sainz might finally get the call to Red Bull. I think he is good enough to be in a top team. He's performed. He's another one that's got stick this season. He's a little bit reckless at times, but he does get consistent point finishes. I mean, 6-point finishes this season, that's pretty good in a Toro Rosso. And yeah, I feel like he could do a job in a top team. Probably is a number 2 driver again. I don't think he's in the same class as Verstappen. I wouldn't say he's too far behind. But yeah, I think with the rest of the season, and then next season, he'd be a good bet for Red Bull in 2019. For his teammate, I know who I'm not going for, that's Danny Kvyat. He's just not good enough for F1, I don't think, and it shows. He's only scored 4 points this season. 2 points finishes compared to Sainz's point finishes. It's just not good enough. He wasn't very good last season. He got that podium in China for Red Bull, but apart from that, he did absolutely nothing. He's a torpedo. I just think he crashes way too much. He took out his teammate at Silverstone, which in my opinion was completely his fault. I just think he's reckless, not good enough. He shouldn't have got the call to Red Bull. I think John-Eric Verne should have got the call over Kvyat. Kvyat just impressed in a couple of races for Toro Rosso, and Verne was so much more consistent. I think Verne's been very unlucky to be kicked out of F1, but yeah, that's how it's worked out. I think Kvyat will be out of F1. The Red Bull driver program is pretty ruthless, so yeah, that's the end for him. Who will replace him? I think it'll be Pierre I can't even say his name. Pierre Gasly, the GP2 champion from last season. I've just seen him do a couple of races in Formula E. He stepped in, I think it was last minute for Buemi, and he finished quite high up. I think he got 2 top 5 finishes. It was a fantastic performance considering he didn't do much practice at all. I think it's time. I just think GP2 champions should get promoted to F1. Gasly last season, I didn't watch much of GP2 last season, but when I did watch it, he was pretty good overall. Silverstone, I think it was the main race where I was actually there, and I think Gasly won his first GP2 race there. So I was there for that, and I just think he's ready to step up to Toro Rosso, and I think he'd be a better bet than Kvyat overall, I'm going to be honest. Over to Haas. I have Magnussen as the number 1 driver. Personally, I'm not that keen on Magnussen. I don't know why, I've just never thought he's that amazing. He's like a solid driver, but nothing spectacular. Since that podium for McLaren in his first race, I just haven't rated him at all. I don't know why. But for my grid, with Grosjean going to Ferrari, I think Magnussen's the one to lead Haas. I know that Gene Haas says the Magnussen and Grosjean are going to be confirmed for next season, but if Ferrari come calling for Grosjean, I can't see them stepping in his way. And yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Grosjean did end up at Ferrari. I think that's probably why he joined Haas in the first place. So Magnussen to lead for Haas. And I've got Charles Leclerc to be the second driver at Haas. Currently leading the GP2 Championship. I think he's got pole at every single race this season. And he's won quite a few of them. And that's another driver that I saw at Silverstone last season. He was in... he was driving for the Haas team in practice 1. So that was interesting to see. I didn't know who he was back then, but I've seen him in GP2. I've watched GP2 most races this season, and he's been brilliant. And he's a Ferrari young driver, so I can see them putting Grosjean to give in the Ferrari to give Leclerc the chance of a couple of years of experience at Haas, potentially impressing, and then going to Ferrari and. Yeah, maybe partnering Vettel for a season and then possibly becoming #1 driver. That's me planning Leclerc's future right there. And I think he'd be a good driver for Haas with a team leader like Magnussen, who will have, I think, 4 seasons of experience. He'd be good for Leclerc. And I can see that partnership working. And then we've got 2 teams to go. Renault, first of all. Unfortunately, I've got to put Hülkenberg in this. I've always rated Hülkenberg. I think he's brilliant. One of the most consistent drivers in F1. I absolutely can't believe he hasn't scored a podium at all. I think his best finish is a 4th place. And yeah, he should have been given the call with Ferrari for 2013 in my opinion, but he's been so unlucky with all the driving movements. How he hasn't been in a top team, I don't know. He just hasn't made the career choices like the good ones. A bit like Alonso, but yeah, he's been very unlucky and I can't see him moving to a top team ever, unfortunately. So I think he's going to stick with Renault. I've got a feeling Renault are going to improve, possibly become the 4th best team and start challenging for podiums. That would be great to see because I think Hülkenberg could do a real job at the top of the field. In terms of his teammate, you might notice that I haven't mentioned Sergio Perez. He was another one I wasn't sure. I've got a feeling he wants to leave Force India. I think Ocon's putting him under too much pressure, and I think he thinks he deserves a top drive, and I probably would agree with that. He's scored in all but 2 races this season, big points as well, a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, quite a few 7ths in what is the 4th best car, so he has been outperforming the car. And I think he'd do a decent job, and I've got a feeling Renault want him. I think Renault did make an offer for him for that was last season and he turned them down, but I think he's getting a little sick of Force India. But I think it's between Renault and Ferrari, but I think Grosjean to Ferrari, Perez to Renault is more likely, and Perez, I think he might be using Renault as a stepping stone. It's quite hard because he has been in F1 for quite a few years now. But Renault, I think, are going to pick it up and be challenging at the front soon. So that would be an interesting partnership. Of course, they were teammates at Force India, so that would be pretty cool to see how that pans out. I've got a feeling that would be even more even, that's something. Even more equal than it has been in the past between them two. So Renault, that would be an amazing partnership, I've got to say. And then the final team, Sauber. It was tough with this. It was between Wehrlein, Ericsson and Giovinazzi. Wehrlein, I think, will get edged out, and that's why I put him in the Force India. I really did have nowhere to put him, so it's probably not the greatest system, but just to throw him into Force India, but that could happen. So I've gone for Ericsson. The new owners seem to absolutely love Ericsson. Everyone that seems to have owned Sauber likes Ericsson. It must be the money. I've got to say it must be the money. He really hasn't scored many points at all. I also don't think he's good enough. And he's very lucky to be in F1, I've got to say. And yeah, I can see him being in F1 for a few more seasons as well. And he's scored no points this season. Couple of 11th places, but Wehrlein definitely outshadowing him. And I think pretty much every teammate he's had has. Naza, I can't even remember who he was with at Caterham. Maybe Kobayashi. Maybe is it that far back? But Ericsson, lucky to be in F1, lucky he has money. Teammate, I've gone for Giovinazzi. He obviously did 2 races at the start of the season when Wehrlein was injured. Put in a fantastic performance in Australia first time out. China, not so good. He did crash out twice, but I feel like he impressed enough in that first race. And I think he has been in practice sessions this season, so that could be Ferrari building him up for F1 next season. He is a Ferrari young driver, and they seem to put drivers in the Sauber and have just a big connection with Sauber. So I can see Giovinazzi being in there. And yeah, that's actually all the grid. And the 3 drivers I think to miss out for next season will be Raikkonen retiring, Kvyat doing maybe Formula E to follow John-Eric Verne. Palmer just out. He's not good enough. He scored 1 point in how many races? 21 last season, and there's been 10. He scored 1 point in 31 races for Renault, which just isn't good enough in all this. And I know he's been quite unlucky, but I say about GP2 champions should be in F1. He's had his time. It's too much, and I think he's going to be out. In terms of Renault, I did consider putting Kubica in there. I'd love to see Kubica in F1 again. I think he had the potential to become world champion and to be in the bracket of Vettel, Hamilton and Alonso, but unfortunately his injuries have curtailed his career, and he is doing a test coming up. I've just got a feeling he can't drive the car properly, and it would be too much of a gamble to put him in an F1 car. Maybe Renault, but I really want to say Kubica next season for Renault, but I just can't do it, guys, unfortunately. So I'll go through the full grid here. So Mercedes, Hamilton, Bottas, Red Bull, Ricciardo, Verstappen, Ferrari, Vettel, Grosjean, Force India, Ocon, Verline, Williams, Massa, Stroll, McLaren, Alonso, Van Dorn, Toro Rosso, Gasly and Sainz, Haas, Magnussen and Leclerc, Renault, Hülkenberg, Perez, Sauber, Ericsson, Giovinazzi. So do leave your opinions in the comments below. Tell me your grid, if you agree with mine, what changes you'd make. Do leave a like if you have enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you haven't already to my channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time out. Goodbye.